You are listening to Morning Edition on 89.3 WFPL. I'm Bill Burton, and it's time for us to take a look at the science behind the forecast as I am joined by Wave 3 meteorologist Tawana Andrew. Good morning, Tawana.
Good morning. We're talking about a concerning part of hurricane season, especially when we're looking back at storms like Hurricane Helene.
Definitely. It seems as if hurricanes are getting bigger and getting bigger faster, and that's what we're talking about today, the idea of rapid intensification of hurricanes. Tell us about that.
So, the National Hurricane Center defines rapid intensification as an increase in maximum sustained wind speeds of a tropical cyclone of at least 35 miles per hour within 24 hours. So, there's a
Okay,
lot of wind in a very short amount of time.
definitely.
And and we know that for a hurricane to form, we need a couple of things. We need a pre-existing weather disturbance,
Okay.
low wind shear. So that means that there's not much change in the wind speed or direction over where the storm is. You need sea surface temperatures of at least 80 degrees Fahrenheit over a depth of 150 feet. That's going to be very important with the rapid intensification part. And you
Okay.
also need an area of thunderstorms because you need something for everything to really get kicked off. And researchers are diving into why storms try and do intensify so quickly. And NCAR, they found two modes of rapid intensification. The first one is when a hurricane starts to intensify symmetrically. So once you start to see that storm basically becoming very circular, that is when you have to get quite concerned.
Mm,
And this typically happens when there's plenty of warm water and low wind shear.
okay.
Hurricanes Andrew and Katrina, we know those names,
Oh, yeah.
were perfect examples of this. And last year, we saw Hurricane Otis. The wind speed in that storm increased by 110 miles per hour in
Wow.
24 hours before hitting Mexico's west coast as a Category 5 storm. That storm was beyond most forecasts. So that is why we're working so hard to find out why this kind of intensification happens.
110
Now,
miles in 24 hours. That's staggering.
that is incredibly scary. The second manner of rapid intensification occurs when there are significant bursts of thunderstorms happening away from a storm center. So you have this explosion of thunderstorms occurring in that storm, and that allows it to basically reconfigure its circulation. And while it may not become a Cat 3, Cat 4, a Cat 5, it can easily become a Cat 1, Cat 2 within a couple of hours in that type of scenario. And that on its own can be incredibly dangerous. So, of course, we have to keep an eye on that because this can happen in situations where you have strong wind shear or even not as strong or not as warm water. So it happens in situations where you're not paying as much attention to it, and that can catch people off guard pretty quickly.
Hmm.
Now, this method of intensification is not guaranteed because only 10% of storms going through this process in unfavorable environment will actually intensify this way. So it's rare, but it happens, and we want to make sure that we're keeping an eye on it so we can keep
Absolutely.
everybody safe. So Hurricane Helene, as I mentioned, went through rapid intensification. It went basically from a cluster of thunderstorms off the Yucatan Peninsula to a Cat 4 storm, making landfall in the Big Bend of Florida within 3 days. And the thing that caught my attention the most and how I knew that it was going to rapidly intensify is that
Yeah.
the water in the Gulf was 85 to 87 degrees.
Mm,
That
bad
is
sign.
that is bath water. And those very warm temperatures stretched well beyond that 150 feet requirement in the water column. So
Oh,
that was even more fuel for that hurricane. Now, the thing that didn't make a lot of headlines in the US was that Hurricane John made landfall on Mexico's southern Pacific coast a couple of days prior. And that also went through rapid intensification. So it went from a tropical storm to a Cat 3 in a couple of hours
wow.
before it make landfall. So we basically had two systems on either side of basically Mexico doing this nearly at the same time.
Mm.
And a reminder that last year, the Big Bend of Florida had to deal with Hurricane Idalia rapidly intensifying before making landfall. So this is something that we're starting to see more and more, especially in parts of the Gulf of Mexico. So since 2023, global sea surface temperatures have been abnormally warm. And really, June 2024 marked 15 consecutive months of record breakingly warm global sea surface temperatures.
Oh,
So we are dealing with very warm water and plenty of fuel for these storms. I dove into the research and I found that 79% of category 3 to 5 hurricanes undergo rapid intensification. And of the 63 tropical cyclones that caused at least $1 billion in damage, from 1980 until Hurricane Beryl in June of 2024. So this doesn't even cover Helene. 70% of those tropical cyclones went through rapid intensification.
hmm.
So we're talking Katrina, Harvey, Ian, Maria, Sandy, all caused major damage, all went through rapid intensification. And this is something to keep in the back of our minds because hurricane season doesn't end until November 30th, and we still have a very active Atlantic that we have to keep an eye on.
Yeah, still have a couple of months to grit our teeth and hope we can get through. But at least now we have a better understanding of the concept of rapid intensification of hurricanes because of the latest edition of Science Behind the Forecast with Wave 3 meteorologist Tawana Andrew. Thanks for the knowledge, Tawana.
Of course.